And why would you want to do that? Because not only is it from one of my favorite Nintendo DS games, but it's just such a striking figure in general, even if it is canonically only 3 foot tall or something. You are talking about Hadron, the final boss of Custom Robo Arena, no? That's right. For this build, I'm going to replicate the frame of the LEGO Construction figures, like Spider-Man here. But you do not like the LEGO Construction figures, due to their reduced pose ability and limiting shoulders. While that is true generally speaking, I do think Hadron will work in this style. Compared to other Construction figures, which usually don't come with weapons, Hadrons are built into the arms, meaning we don't have to worry about the mini ball socket wrist joints giving way under a heavy load. Also, since Hadron doesn't have a traditional head, that should make things easier in that department. In that case, let us get started. I had a template of the Spider-Man Construction figure already built in Bricklink Studio, so I went straight to work reconfiguring it, starting off with the legs. My initial plan was to use pearl gold and dark brown for the color scheme, but I quickly had to change gears as the inverted curved slopes I needed don't come in pearl gold. That and there are even fewer dark brown pieces to use. To be fair, I doubt LEGO would use so much pearl gold in a common Construction figure. I guess so. But once I switched to bright light orange and reddish brown, things started coming together. Otherwise, the legs were pretty simple, with a brown base layer and golden armor on top. Another thing I don't like about Construction figures is their feet. Like, they just look so weird, so I made mine plain and symmetrical, as well as a stud shorter than the norm, similar to the Green Goblin Construction figure. Moving up to the torso, I realized I wasn't going to be able to just retool the standard one on account of the reduced waist diameter. I also had to lower the shoulder height, and even then the chest is a little bigger than it probably should be, which also made me extend the waist segment by 1 row. Getting exact ratios can be quite problematic, and at the end of the day, you will most likely have to compromise to some degree, especially with a build like this where structural stability is key. But while I was still fiddling with the design, I discovered that LEGO recently released this 1x2 variant of the Technic brick with ball socket in, of all sets, the brick-built Winnie the Pooh from earlier this year. That is something you have wanted for a long time now. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it only comes in red as of now, so it won't be of much use until a more neutral color is available. This means that a 1x2 version of the Technic brick with ball joint may also be a thing one day. That would be very useful, but nothing of the sort will be needed for this build. And speaking of which, it's time to move to the left arm. It's a good thing I began with this one, as it was the trickier one of the two. While I didn't need to mess with the traditional Construction shoulder, I did have to try and design a sphere instead, which ended up being a couple of 3x3 dishes on brackets that look surprisingly decent. I also added a door rail underneath the brackets to give them a little more support so they won't accidentally wobble off. As for the lower arm, I never realized that Hadron still has an actual hand, which made my life a little bit more difficult, as hands are generally bulky things, and I had to fit mine into a confined space. Since I didn't need any articulation, I utilized 2 1x1 angled tooth plates for the fingers, and a round plate with bar for the thumb. Now I wanted to use the 3x3 cone for the barrel, but with it not available in bright light orange I had to assemble my own, but building a cylindrical shape that also had to securely mount to the arm ended up making the thing a bit large and dense, to the point I worried that the arm might not be able to hold itself up. It was then I realized that the diameter was almost 4 studs, which meant that, with a little tweaking, I could just use the 4x4 hollow cone, which also provided a much cleaner look. There was less going on with the right arm, and I was able to mirror a good portion of the left one for it as well. Now all custom robos have what is called a pod on their back, and Hadron is no exception. The 2 big issues I ran into was, 1, I was building in the wrong direction, meaning I had the anti-studs of the pod facing the anti-studs on the back of the torso, and 2, I couldn't simply mount it sideways anyway, as that would cause the pod to easily detach. I remembered that the Captain America Construction figure had an axle in its back so the shield could be stored there, but to achieve a similar effect, I had to carve out the torso to allow for such a mounting point. But to my amazement, the 1x2 brick with axle hole doesn't come in reddish brown, meaning I had to use the Technic pin variant and ensure that the pod would not rotate or spin when attached. It is always interesting to discover that certain pieces do not come in a particular color, especially a common one like reddish-brown, right? But that just leaves us with the head, which was pretty straightforward, even if it is a bit small. Now, just to make sure everything is sound, I built a real-life prototype, and was able to balance and hold its arms out just fine. I was also impressed that the pod does not interfere with being able to hold onto the figure comfortably. So all that remains is the finishing touches. Now, this is usually a difficult part for me, and was no exception here, because I keep tweaking and refining the model to an excessive degree. In this case, it was the lower legs, as I overlooked these small thrusters, and adding them was a bit of a hassle, and the end result is still a bit too bulky if you ask me. Either way, after approximately 8 hours of total building, overall I'm quite pleased with the result, at least when I'm able to let go of my obsessive tendencies. The color scheme works perfectly, with all but the hips coming in proper colors, and the fact that it qualifies as a construction figure is the icing on the cake. Having to build with such a concept in mind also allowed you to let go of making it excruciatingly accurate. Well, until the end. You have to admit it is leagues better than your last Custom Robo MOC you built. Agreed. Although I built the Rayo 1 years ago, but even still it was so frail it couldn't even stand up on its own without support. Perhaps you could redesign it in the construction style? I can't see why not, but I'm not going to put it on my to-do list just yet. Fair enough. In the meantime, you can find the image gallery and digital building file for Hadron in the description. But that's it for this video. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good one.